Hello and welcome to another Deadpool and Wolverine custom. This one's obviously going to be Deadpool, and if you don't want to see me going over the bits I've already customised in this figure from many a year ago, you can skip to 226 when I actually begin the customising from this stage. For those of you that are still here, I made this custom about 4 years ago, back in my first year of university. You can see that it is the Deadpool 2 version, the Amazon exclusive burnt variant, where it's this kind of awful brown and not actually the grey that it really should have been. Now this was a fun little thing that I did just during lockdown because my first year of university was spent during COVID, so I was sat in my room just repainting this figure to make it look a bit more accurate, and so there were a few minor tweaks I made, the main one being the repaint, which I was very happy with up until now, where I'm obviously having to change it into the Deadpool 3 version. So I'm taking out all the accessories just so I can kind of get to grips with showing you the bits that I want to show you, and it'll be much easier to customise without having loose accessories kind of rattling around on him. This was a fairly recent change I made. I used a rotary tool and carved out a channel for his bandolier. Personally, didn't like it being a loose piece, so I carved out a channel. You can see I didn't fill all the way on the back there, but I'm not too bothered because it's usually hidden anyway. But I carved out a channel, sunk in the bandolier, and just kind of sanded down any excess. So the black is just the bandolier that's carved in there. It means he's still got full range. I don't have to worry about his bandolier or his belt kind of wobbling around on him. It's secure. I just like my figures kind of having all their bits secure on them. Just personal preference. Now the other major thing I did was modify his head. He had such little range in his neck. This is kind of when they were getting to grips with their dumbbell joint situation. It's still not perfect, but they are getting better at it. So you can see I've cut away a fair bit of material and taken a little notch out the back so you can look up a bit further. If I pop the head off, you can actually see how much material I've removed from there. And the range that now allows. So a ton more range than you used to have. But getting into the custom now, you can see I'm going to have to switch these over. So taking a pair of little snips, normally for 3D printing, I can cut this little pouch away. It's obviously meant to be on the other leg, and a slightly different setup for the pouches when it's on that other leg. One of the main differences they made to his costume in this movie is they swapped this pouch onto the other leg and his knife onto the other leg as well. Now, while most of the stuff is just glued to him, there is that peg there, which I can fill with the peg from the pouch, that's fine. Just going to be a little bit of kind of gluing and hopefully reattaching. But I do now have some pouches to put in my folder box, which is ideal because I had none to customise this figure with. Another change they made to his costume, his mask now has seams that go on the side of his head, one that goes above his ear and one that goes below it down to his chin. For that, I'm just going to be using some red thread, which I was worried that there wasn't enough for here. But as you can see, the majority of it was just hidden by the band, thankfully, because it would just be a hassle to go and get more. So obviously the super glue there, I've put a nice little bit on my painting card. And I'm just going to run this little bit of cotton through it, using the tweezers to hold it down. And then using my thumb to hold the other end. Which does mean my thumb gets temporarily glued to the head sculpt. It's a tiny bit of super glue, so I can just peel my thumb away, as you can see there. And once that's done, I can just cut the excess off. Which you can see leaves me with this. They are a little bit more prominent than I would like them to be, but also I'm using very thin sewing cotton, so it's kind of as good as I'm going to get. But now focusing back onto the leg, I will move back onto the head afterwards, but that's when I go back to sanding some parts. So just using a scalpel, being very careful to cut away from me. You don't want to cut towards yourself because if the knife slips, you will just end up cutting into yourself, especially since I've put a fresh blade on this. Now I had already cut the top end, it was just the bottom end that had to be cut. And you can see it comes away quite nicely, and there you can see again more of that brown. Now taking the pouches and cutting that peg off, I can now fill this hole with the peg, which you can see there fills it pretty much perfectly. I do end up putting some super glue over the top to smooth it out a bit more. And now I also need to make a little bit of a flat spot to attach the sheath to. So I'm just cutting away this buckle here, just so there's kind of enough grip for the actual sheath to super glue to. Obviously if I'm super gluing to the absolute point of that rounded buckle, it's not going to have the best security on there. And also bring that back in, trying to figure out whereabouts I want placement. I'm thinking about there. It does seem like it's slightly higher up on this suit than it was on the old one, but only by maybe a millimetre or so. So there's that glued on, and fairly securely. It doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Now getting back to the head, and just kind of the areas I want to sand down a bit. I'm going to sand down, because they've been filled with super glue, this thread will be quite easy to sand. And I'm also going to sand the top of that bandolier because I did way too much silver dry brushing when I made this custom originally. You can see that's much nicer. It's got more of the kind of rubbery plastic look that it's meant to have. So we're back to what it should have been to begin with. I've also sanded down the sides of the head and anywhere where I've cut those straps off. So that's been sanded down where the plug was, and I've also sanded down where these black straps were that I used a scalpel to cut off the chunk of the excess and then sanded them back smooth into the calf. And there you can see these lines are a bit more subtle now that they've had some sanding done to them. I did also add some clear red just to blend it back in a bit. But now onto the actual painting process. So just bringing in the black to get the bulk of the detail done. You can see his calf there. The paneling on the side is where it goes now instead of on the front. And also I've done the black on his chest as well there. And they're just some basic red acrylic paint. And using a bit of that black that was left on the brush. You can see it blends fairly well. That area where there was the brown on the thigh is now fairly blended in. The issue is just that it's matte compared to the gloss. And you can see it fairly well blends in on those calves and the shins. I then went and did a dry brush over the entire thing to kind of brighten the red and make it a little bit less of a dark hue. He is much brighter in this new movie. So a bit of a little repaint over the already existing repaint. Now I do prefer this colour. It is a little bit desaturated. I would have preferred a more saturated colour, but this will do for now because it kind of gives it a bit of weathering as well, without having to do the weathering myself. Now this is an offcut from that strap that I removed earlier, and that will do nicely enough just to add the extra strap that needs to be on this side. Is it perfect? No, it should technically be parallel, but there's not much I can do with what I'm working with here. Now in terms of the pouches, I just so happen to have a spare piece from Longshot, who also happens to have 3 pouches that don't have a knife in. So taking that, cutting the top edge that's flat in half, folding it over and re-gluing, that gives me the lid of the pouches. And there's the pouches that I didn't have anywhere to use. This also saves me making them out of Milliput or green stuff. Very handy having a whole box of fodder that I can just dip into if I need bits. Now to add some more detail to obviously his chest plate, just taking an offcut of cardboard, and you can see cutting some little squares out there to make the bridging that goes across his new plate. Painting those the same red, just to blend it back in. And it seems to work fairly well. So I'm going to take this metallic gold marker pen, do all of his little metallic gold bits, including the backs of his hands, obviously the edges of those details that we just added. Any silver buckle on him, 90% of them get turned to gold. So that was just me going over any of the silver I could find and making it gold. Also adding some line work to the sheath, which you can see there. And also to the sheaths on his back for the katanas, which is just a simple line, which works quite nice. Now I did also go and do his belt in a bright red lacquer. This was my second time doing it because during another bit of filming I painted it and put my thumb in it, which obviously completely ruined the nice finish that I'd done. So scraping it off with a scalpel and redoing it, Not too big of a deal, but obviously a bit of a pain to have to redo that. And the paint I used for that was just some Tamiya Lacquer Painto. I don't use this stuff too much, but obviously it comes in handy for details like this. Now he does, of course, have his gold-plated Desert Eagles, I think they are. Now these guns are nowhere near accurate, and even removing the muzzle, the silencer, I'm not a gun person. I don't know what they look like. This is just me making do with what I've got. And this is that gold pen again. So going in and just going over the black straight with the gold pen. You'll see those don't work out very well later on, but I tried. Now the katanas aren't accurate either, so I took some sandpaper, removed all of the silver, and then using that gold pen, went and did the backing to the blade, as well as the details that got up the handle, and I had a silver version of the pen as well, so I did just the pommel of the katana. Now I did have an issue here where my matte coat kind of frosted it, and didn't just frost it like a matte coat, it kind of made it cloudy, which doesn't show up very well on camera for some reason. So this is kind of the best I can show. It made it very flat and not in like a flat coat that you normally want. You should be able to see there it's kind of grey in some places. You'll notice specifically on the trigger finger hand. Don't know why this is happening. Not really had this issue before. So yeah, a little bit of remedy to that. I'm going to go in with this clear, again, the same brand that I used for the red, just to try and fix it up. You can see I also did the eyes. I thinned the eyes with that black paint I used earlier, and then glossed those as well. A little bit more accurate, his eyes were meant to be quite small in this movie, compared to his original suit. Now I did also go and do some weathering on those pouches, which was these paints here. My kind of go-to for weathering. But now back on track with what I was talking about originally. You can see the gloss has brought the blades out quite nicely. Not too sure how I feel about the way it looks on the handle, but it has fixed the weird clouding issue. Unfortunately, that does mean that some of the black areas are a little glossier than I would have liked them to be, but I'll take it for not having the weird clouding issue. Now these guns ended up being completely ruined. Even a gloss coat wouldn't have saved these, so I'll revisit these at some point in the future. I'll probably 3D print some proper accurate ones and make a full upgrade kit, but for now, they're gone. But now with a sudden audio change, because I'm in the car recording this audio, and before I say bye, here's a quick look at how he is now that he's finished, now that he's got all his accessories back, and of course I'll be doing a comparison of how he shapes up next to the Wolverine costume from the other week. And considering that this guy was made in the middle of me moving house, my setup for recording this was 2 cardboard boxes, and my cutting mat with obviously my backdrop there as well. That's what I was working on to film this. And then all the parts I've used for him have been whatever I could scavenge from my boxes that are sat in the living room. So yeah, I think with all that considered, he came out pretty good, and I'm very happy with the outcome. Especially when you put him next to Wolverine, it all kind of just feels right. But yeah, like I said, very happy with the outcome. Let me know what you guys think. I have a fair few ideas for ways to improve them. I may do a video with the 2 of them where I go and improve them both. Some 3D printed bits could definitely improve Deadpool here. Custom head with interchangeable eyes, articulated toes, the skeleton from the beginning of the movie, the claws. Yeah, I have a lot of ideas for them. But let me know what you guys think, and thank you so much for watching this kind of mishap of a video. And I'll see you next week, when I should be moved into my new place and ready to record videos properly.